we are getting better at predicting the weather. Obviously, there's more data, there's better tools, there's more science. My number one way of predicting what the weather is going to be, is how should I dress today? Right. Is I go to usually my back door, I open it up, and I step outside and look at the sky. Because I want to know what it is right now. Why can we not predict the stock market if we have all these tools and all this data and all these researchers and billions of dollars going into research? Why can we not predict the stock market and what it's going to do tomorrow like we can the weather? I think there's two things that overwhelm our rationale and get us emotionally inclined to believe these liars. If I can convince somebody sitting across from me that they've made so many mistakes in their past that they can't trust themselves, they should hire me. Or I predict somebody's future is so overwhelmingly big that they can't afford to make a mistake, they should hire me. That's manipulation. That's not help.
Correct.
Right? So we got to undo that. The amount of times that the meteorologists predict the future, in the 36-hour forecast, is now the same statistical significance as us today predicting a 3-day forecast, right? So that if they were right 25% of the time in the 36-hour forecast in the 80s, now they're right 25% of the time in the 3-day forecast, which is huge.
Wow.
So obviously there's more data, there's better tools, there's more science, there's more software engineers and all this other stuff, weather balloons, whether they're from China or wherever, right? All these things coming into play, and we are getting better at predicting the weather.
Yeah.
Still, my number one way of predicting what the weather is going to be, is how should I dress today? Right. Is I go to usually my back door, I open it up, and I step outside and look at the sky. Because I want to know what it is right now. I make my decisions, even with all the advancements in weather, I make my decisions about what I'm going to wear today, what I'm going to do. My next steps is based off of what's going on outside right now. I look out the window right now, cloudy skies, raindrops on the window. If I go outside, I'm probably going to put a rain jacket on.
Yeah.
Right? So why do we think that we can do this same thing? Or why can't we? I guess let's start with this question. Why can we not predict the stock market if we have all these tools and all this data and all these researchers and billions of dollars going into research? Why can we not predict the stock market and what it's going to do tomorrow like we can the weather?
I think that's a really great question. I think what's interesting about this metaphor too is I think people think we can predict the stock market in terms of, I think people think we're getting better at predicting the stock market, just like we're getting better at predicting the weather.
Do you really think though that do you think they actually think we can predict, or do you think they hope?
That's a good question.
Because I don't think I was talking to somebody the other day and do you actually believe that anybody out there has some crystal ball? And he was like, well, it'd be cool if they did. I'm like, yeah, it would absolutely would. Why would it be cool? Why would it be cool if we could know what the stock market was going to do tomorrow? Well, because then we wouldn't be wrong.
Right.
We have risk when we make investment decisions. And oftentimes we're scared. We have fear about the decisions that we're making today because there's so much unknown about tomorrow.
And I think that's the key right there. I think emotion, to answer your question, is what separates being able to predict the weather as opposed to the stock market.
100%. I was hoping you'd say that. Finally, we got there. Wait. Thanks for coming to the show.
Sometimes it takes me a little longer than the other kids.
No, I think that is it's so true. It's so real because what the weather has, right? What earthquake fault lines have is a ton of science, physical science, sure. Right? What hurricane patterns have is science.
Right.
What the stock market has is humans and emotions.
Right.
And that is why market cycles exist, because sometimes a bunch of human beings get really excited, even greedy, and then sometimes a bunch of human beings get like fearful and make decisions out of fear.
Yeah.
If we can have reason to believe that tomorrow might look a little bit like it does today, we can be hopeful. But if there's things, right, headwinds, right, like we like to call, like tailwinds and headwinds. That's tailwinds. Tomorrow's probably going to be propelled from today.
Right.
Right. Headwinds. Something might change our course
Yeah.
overnight. And so those is a term we always use, but those are very emotional words. And so when you have things like war in Ukraine or inflation or just all these things that we're going through, all these headwinds, tomorrow might be different. So it makes me scared. So I'm going to sell. And no hurricane ever has gotten into the middle of like the Atlantic Ocean and been like, you know what? This water's kind of deep. I think I'm going to I'm scared. I'm going to go back. I'm going to change direction.
Right.
Hurricanes they don't have emotions.
Right.
Right. So I think to your point, like something I put in the notes here, the show notes is let's just stop predicting that anyone has a crystal ball. Let's stop allowing ourselves to buy into this.
Yeah.
I think almost anyone, a lot of people, I guess I should say, probably has enough like rational thought to say the chances of us just predicting the future is slim to none.
Yeah.
Right? Most people believe that. But then all of a sudden, we put money in the market, and what do? We subscribe to every analyst that thinks that they can predict or make the next big call.
Yeah.
Right? I can tell you the next big stock. I can predict the next big crash. What are we doing? And I think there's two things that overwhelm our rationale and get us emotionally inclined to believe these liars, right? And one is I think that oftentimes we've made mistakes, like money mistakes in the past. And so we kind of feel like we're behind. Like I think that most people I speak to, when I work with people one-on-one and I'm sitting down, there is some element of, well, I made a mistake here, or I made these decisions here and I just haven't been able to catch back up to where I think I should be. We are always kind of trying to catch up. And so if somebody tells us they can predict the next big move or the next big thing, then all of a sudden we might be inclined, we want to believe them, because if they're right and we jump on their ship, then we will make ground. We will make up that ground. We'll catch back up.
Yeah, I think it's in our society today, it's a lot of, get rich quick. And people find that, okay, if I jump on that train and get rich quick, then I'm safe. Then I have safety. But they're making that decision a lot of the times in a place of fear, kind of like you said, I feel behind. So now I got to make all these giant moves and guys do this all the time. I got to do 5 things at the same time I got to work this angle and that angle. And I think taking a step back and realizing, hey, I'm making this decision out of fear because I feel like I'm behind, because all these talking heads on TV tell me I'm behind and tell me that all these things are crazy in the world. It comes from a place of fear, I think.
So I keep a journal, and one of my pages, one of my sections of a journal is always like things millionaires have told me.
Yeah.
So it just by nature of our job, we get to sit down with a lot of people that have a lot of assets, right?
That's a great idea.
First of all, let me tell you, if you don't have $1 million, the show's still for you, and financial planning is still for you. I think I want to take a second to just clarify. There's a lot of people that say, I don't need, no financial planner would want to work with me. There are financial planners that are willing to sit down, to give you a second, to give you moments of time. And I think it's very, very, very important to not talk, don't disqualify yourself because you think you're not in a position to deserve education or somebody's time. That being said, a lot of people that we do work with, they do have millions of dollars.
Well, and they started from someplace. They started at one point with nothing. So
100%.
Everybody starts in the same spot.
Yep.
So,
and so I think one of the things I started doing was I asked them for okay, you're a millionaire. By many accounts, you've made it, right? Whatever that made it is, you've made it.
Right.
What's one thing that you would tell me today that is the most important piece of wisdom? And it's funny because almost every single thing that I write down, it has nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
Right? Once
Right.
you get to a place of financial freedom, and financial freedom is not tied to a dollar sign, like it's not tied to a figure, it's tied to a state of mind.
Right.
Once you reach financial freedom, the whole point of reaching financial freedom is so that money doesn't matter. I'm free from being tied to a required number of assets, right?
Yeah.
Making decisions, or at least most money's always going to guide decisions, right? But at least most of my decisions are free of thinking about a required amount of money, right?
Right.
And that can happen for a lot of people at a lot of different stages. That being said, once you reach that financial freedom, I think a lot more of these like wisdom nuggets, golden nuggets, are not tied to money. However, the most like out of, I don't know, 30 or 40 multimillionaires that I've got to ask this question to, the most consistent answer to any of those is you are not behind. Wherever you're at today, you're not behind.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many multi-millionaires that I'm talking to in like their 60s, where they're like, Brandon, when I turned 50,
Yeah.
I had all debt, no assets.
That's crazy.
You know, so I know that's a little bit of a off track thing, but we were talking about, you know, the being behind, driving our need to believe in something that we know to be untrue.
Right.
So why do we, like, if you want time freedom, if you want financial freedom, if you want to be free of like financial stress, you can turn the news off. You can turn the little like S&P indicator, blah, 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 blah off, because it cannot, no news anchor can tell you what is going to happen tomorrow or in a year or whatever.
I could think of like 10 clients I would love to cut the cable bill off for them.
And think about like, they're like, oh, I hired you because I just want more time, right? Like, I don't want to have to sit there and do all the homework that you do.
Right.
I need some help. I need some guidance. I need this, this, and this. And we're like, okay. So what do? We take all the work off their plate. And then what do? They go home, they sit in their chair, they turn on the news and watch insert, you know, financial pornography network that's just like red arrows and green arrows and big words of crash and like, you know, all these things. And then what do? They pick up the phone and call us because they're worried. What are you doing? You hired us so we could take stress off your plate.
Right.
And you're subscribing to this idea that somebody, some Monday morning quarterback, knows more about the game than the quarterback playing the game on Sunday. Like, that's wild to me.
Right.
Right? So turn it off, because they don't know any more than the rest of us do. The other piece on the flip side, so that's, we're trying to catch up. On the flip side, I think a lot of people subscribe to this because it is scary. It is like to think about our future, right? I get, like in my email, I said, I get angry when I think about the tools that the financial industry shows and puts in front of clients,
Right.
prospective clients, people, human beings, because all of these, like we soften the colors a little bit, but all these color charts and graphs and predictive models that we put in front of people, like, oh, you should work with us because look at what your future looks like. Well, now all of a sudden, anytime there's a deviation from that line we showed them, they're scared. Like when we show you what your like number, your magic number should be when you're 65 for a happiness forever thing,
Right.
Like I'm 25 years old. How am I supposed to get to $2.8 million? I make 60 grand a year.
Right.
How is that not stressful? How are we not inducing stress? We're perpetuating it. Two models. If I can convince somebody sitting across from me that they've made so many mistakes in their past that they can't trust themselves, they should hire me. Or I predict somebody's future is so overwhelmingly big that they can't afford to make a mistake, they should hire me. That's manipulation. That's not help.
Correct.
Right? So we got to undo that.
Yeah.
Right? And so again, what I want to do is when I work with someone, when somebody's sitting across from me, I want to grab their hand and like walk over to the window and be like, look, let's look outside. What is going on right now? Like, what's going on in your life right now? When I wake up in the morning and I didn't know to put on a jacket or a t-shirt, I mean, it's springtime in Tennessee. We were at like 80 degrees 2 days ago. Then we
Right.
were at like 40 degrees a day ago. And now it's like 60 degrees outside, a million degrees in this office, and rainy, right? Changes every day.
Right.
So where do I go if I want to know what to put on for the day? To my window,
Yeah.
right? Same thing. If I'm sitting across from a human being, let's go to the window of life. Where are you at right now?
Yeah.
And what's the next step?
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest part of our jobs as financial advisors is to what we're trying to do is change a mindset. Like you said, a lot of people have bought into what they see on TV or what they read in the newspaper. And what we're trying to do effectively is convince them to follow a process and actually, make gains, set goals, and get to places where you can actually control. You can control the process, and I think that's the metaphor that we've been chewing on the whole time. Is looking out. Is it 75 degrees today? Okay, I'm going to wear a light jacket and some jeans, and a lot of times kind of what you said is that 25-year-old that comes in and says, well, I need $2.5 million and I don't know, I make 60,000. How am I going to do that? It's like, slow down. Where are you at today? Do you have debt? Are you saving money on a monthly basis? What does your budget look like? There's things to do. There's things to do now in the next 30 days. There's things to do in the next 90 days, and there's things to do in the next 10 years. And I think the mindset needs to shift from when I get this outcome, I've achieved. We're all chasing an outcome when it should be we're chasing a process that allows for flexibility. So if things do change on the TV and we do have a downturn in the market, what are you doing to stabilize your financial position?
Yeah.
And that flexibility, if you can buy into a process to actually set goals for the short term, long term, develop that process and allow for flexibility, I think that gives I've seen that give clients lots of peace, and they don't lend as much credibility, I guess, to the people on TV telling them that, the world's going to end and all that, all those.
I think one of the things that jumped out, I was just talking to a client over the weekend. So we have our app-based financial planning that we use for clients. And we like to monitor what again, go to the window of life. What's it look like today? What we do is we take snapshots of that. We take a picture and we monitor the progress that clients are making. And it hit this weekend with this client, and I was so excited. It made me full. It made me feel good because sometimes we have visions and it just you're like, man, am I missing something? It doesn't seem to be catching quite right. She called and she said, Brandon, I was nervous about updating the numbers in our app. We ask our clients to make sure to go once a month to update, to go to the window and look outside.
Right.
And she was like, the market's down a little bit. I know my income kind of sucks in February and March, and some other changes that had happened over the recent 30 days. She was like, I was not anxious to go and update the numbers. But after updating it, what I realized was my net worth actually still increased. Here's the thing. Sometimes we can get so laser focused on what's right in front of our face that we forget that there's so many other components to our overall financial success. She was nervous, but she had the discipline to still get it done. And that discipline to committing to the process.
Right.
Immediate stress relief, so much so that she needed to call me and say thank you for like we did this. I was nervous. I felt like I was going to be disappointed or even more stressed out. But in reality, I was focused on these two things. You guys monitor 12 financial vital signs, and apparently the other 10 were doing so well that my net worth still increased. I feel better. So when we commit to a process and that process is focused not about predicting our future, not about making us regret decisions in the past, but as of today, we can strip away a lot of the fear, the anxiety, the stress, the greed, the guilt, like all these, we can strip it away. And it actually makes us more capable of due diligence, more capable of analysis, because there is a difference between relying on someone to predict the future and doing homework. And so that's what I want to turn the conversation to is like, what's the difference between due diligence and homework, analysis, and then predicting a crystal, like somebody pulling out a crystal ball and us just believing them, right? What's your thoughts? Do you have any?
Well, I guess my first thought when you say that is, I think of the individual, and I think of the individual situation. So I think, there's a difference in, okay, my goal is to become debt free, right? By the end of the year. And by the end of the year, that means I've X amount of debt and I need to put X amount of dollars towards that debt to be debt free by the end of the year. That means I need to get a second job or a third job, or I need to, if I'm a salesperson, I really need to up my sales, right? A leads to B, leads to C. There's a difference in that. There's a difference between that and somebody going, well, if I look at 10 different people and they all have this amount of debt, and if they can save this and that, I think scope is a big difference. I think people are, when you add in scope, especially on TV, we've been talking about the talking heads the whole time. They have to make a lot of assumptions. They have to, because they don't have time to look at the individual. And so I think predictability, actually making a plan and making, actual dollars in our world is a lot different than we think the economy is going to be here because the top 100 companies are their earnings reports were this. And so they're extrapolating a lot of things out from that. And that's my first thought on that.
Yeah, I think for me, whenever I think about homework versus prediction, because here's the thing is innocence can be a big differentiator here. And or naivete, people come to me all the time and Brandon, I watch this show, or I subscribe to this report, or I read this thing on the social media every day, right? I do these things. I'm doing homework. But in reality, what they're doing is they're paying somebody for their opinion, and they're putting 100% belief, trust, faith, whatever, into what this source is saying. And so I've met with people, all right, Brandon, I did my homework. I did this, and it's you're trying really hard. And that is because you're showing up with effort. So we just got to make a couple small tweaks here to where the effort is going the right direction.
Right.
Because your homework is more, it's not real homework. So let's talk about what the right homework looks like. So first and foremost, if you go to the window today and you look outside, also it's sunny already now. So that's how fast weather changes here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Welcome to Nashville, Tennessee.
If you go to the window and you're like, hey, what is my situation? What if I need to analyze my life right now? This is today's screenshot. I'm here. My financial picture is here. My goals are here. Here, all that stuff. You look at where you're at currently, right? And you're deciding your next step. We have a podcast. We have an episode that is on the financial order of operations. So if you listen to that, you can kind of say, okay, well, I am kind of in this step of building towards my goals. So depending on where that will define your next step for you, right? So maybe you're listening to this and your next step has nothing to do with investments, okay? But let's talk. I want to dive in because you can go back and listen to that episode. But if you want to dive into next steps, if I want to do homework, real homework, not trying to predict the future, if I want to do real homework on my portfolio today, what real steps can I take to have a more healthy, more aligned, more responsible portfolio? Okay. So one of the things that I said, that I wrote down, first thing you need to do is you need to kind of do a risk analysis. And that sounds like it's like a big statistical. Here's the thing. I have a free tool on my website, www.harpethwealthpartners.com. It's on the main page. Scroll down just a little bit. Riskalyze. In that tool, you can answer a few questions. It takes about 10 minutes to work through, and you'll get a risk tolerance score for you. After that's done, you'll get a little email. We can get you to where you can send over your current portfolio, and I can actually assign a risk number to your portfolio. So you could say, hey, I want to be driving 70 miles an hour, but my portfolio is only driving 50, or vice versa. I only want to be driving 50. I don't like all this risk, but my portfolio is driving 90. Right? So the first step in that process might be as simple as just like taking that questionnaire or whatever risk tool that you might have and making sure that your tolerance for risk aligns with your portfolio's exposure to risk. We want those things aligned.
Yeah, find out where you are today, essentially.
Yep. And then there might be some adjustments that you make to either de-risk or even increase risk, right? One of the other big things is time horizon in this. So time horizon plays a lot into how appropriate our portfolio can be. If I need money in 6 months, my portfolio should look very, very different from a portfolio where I need money in 6 years or 30 years. They should not contain the same investments. One of the things that we can do is we can look at the investments in our portfolio, and we can go to performance, like Yahoo Finance, free tool. Type in the ticker, and we can look at like what the stock has done over the past 6 months, over the past 2 years, 6 years, or all this stuff, and we can see trajectories. Now we know that what it's done in the past doesn't necessarily equate to what it's done in the future, but if I see something where in the past 6 months it's crazy volatile, but over the past 6 years it's a much smoother, steady increase of performance, I know that might be a better stock or a better holding for the long term.
Yeah.
Rather than ride the volatility wave for something that I need money for in 6 months and taking a risk of loss. So evaluating time horizon is just saying, hey, I think this money is going to be important to me in this number of months or years. And then making sure I'm not in a position to have too much volatility or not enough growth to meet the goals that I need to have met with those dollars.
If I could just jump in,
please.
Something that I typically do with my clients that I think helps quite a bit, and this goes right in line with changing the mentality that we're talking about and exactly what you're saying, which is think of each investment or each group of money as different buckets of money with different goals. So, one of those things that's a longer term investment that you were talking about, well, that may be suitable for my retirement bucket.
Right.
But it's probably not suitable for I'm buying a car in 3 months bucket.
Exactly.
And so if you have a number in your bank account of cash that you've saved up, start in, this is how people do budgets and all that things too, but start looking at things as, okay, this is my retirement bucket. This is my emergency fund bucket. This is my buying a house in 5-6 years bucket, or the timeline, looking at as a bucket of money, and then the timeline and your risk are the things that we use to give advice on these things. Mm-hmm. But your analysis and combining that, I think, with, if you think about just bucket of money and goal, I think that really makes that kind of simple and clarifies a lot of things for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And also, having 10 buckets doesn't necessarily mean you have to have 10 accounts.
Right.
It just means that we have 10 goals, and if we're working with our own money, we understand that different investments are for different pieces of that puzzle. If we're working with somebody, they understand that.
Right.
And they can communicate that back to me. It's so important because so many advisors out there just take the money and invest it in a portfolio, and they don't really comprehend the depth of when and how and for what the money is going to get used for. So they'll make assumptions, and that's dangerous.
Right.
Another layer to this kind of investment analysis is I think it's important to to go down to like the individual holdings inside your portfolio and do some homework on their values, beliefs, and impact, right? This comes into play. So this can keep us committed to a company during volatility. I think if we're investing in companies that we think are truly having incredible impact, like here's the cool thing about this part of the analysis is if you're listening, you're like, I don't know how to evaluate like the cash flows or the balance sheet of ABC Corporation. I don't even understand it. Right? I never took a class on balance sheets. You don't have to for this part. You can literally go in and say, what are their values? What's their mission statement? What are they giving to? What are they passionate about? Where are their ads showing up at? Right? And if that's the case, then we move on to like the impact. What kind of impact is this company having? And we were talking in pre-show about, I don't even know if they're still a thing, but Tom's shoes. This was like a big thing when I was younger.
Yeah.
And every time you bought a pair of shoes, they gave a pair of shoes to somebody that needed them.
Right.
Right. So it's like if I can find companies that are having impact that I believe in, even if the volatility affects the price of the investment, I believe in the same things they believe in. So it's kind of worth the ride, right? Because I'm investing in somebody that's having the impact I want a company to have on the world I live in, right? And that's for that kind of analysis. So after we've done the risk analysis, after we've looked at the time horizon, we can say, do their values, beliefs, and impact measure up to what I expect companies that I'm giving money to accomplish? And then finally, now we can get into what's the management of the company made of? What's the money situation of the company? Do they have profits? Like, are they selling good quality products? And then we can look at the economy and things. All of those should give us enough kind of data points to say, hey, this supports my goal, or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, we need to cut it out.
Right.
Right. So I think that's the biggest thing. That's differentiating the idea of due diligence. None of that was me trying to predict the future. It's just saying, is this a suitable investment for me today?
Yeah.
That is the difference between due diligence. It's my homework on the investments I'm making versus just a subscription to some talking head that's pulling on my emotions. Any final thoughts?
No final thoughts. Just get out there and figure out, start broad and then get specific. Find out where you are today and then, get some help on finding out where you need to go and where you want to go.
Yeah, so chew on it. Predicting the weather can happen. We're getting better at it. Predicting financial markets, too much emotion involved, will never, ever happen. You have to have a process. You need diligence and due diligence, and it takes work and it takes commitment. And if your values and goals are aligned to your investments, you can weather the storm. And if you have some sort of partnership, it could add to that accountability. So if you have any questions for us, check out our website, hit us up, shoot us an email, leave some comments, whatever you need to do. But reach out and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
We hope you learned from our conversation today. It is important to us that you know this is for educational purposes and not intended to be considered specific advice for any individual listener. If something we discussed is relevant to you and you have questions of how it might be applicable to your specific situation, please reach out to your financial professional. Of course, we are happy to have further conversations with you regarding specific questions or applications to your individual financial situation. With that, here are a few disclosures. Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Harpeth Wealth Partners are separate entities from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Hypothetical examples presented are not representative of any specific investment. Your results may vary. With that, thank you, and we look forward to having you back. Take care.